had a wonderful holiday celebration. I've been quite busy myself. I put together a calendar of firsts. If you are not familiar with that, I'm just going to read a brief passage by Charlotte Mason from Home Education so that you can understand what a calendar of firsts is. It is a capital plan for the children to keep a calendar. The first oak leaf, the first tadpole, the first cowslip, the first catkin, the first ripe blackberries, where seen and when. So while Charlotte Mason taught the importance of time out of doors and nature walks and nature studies and nature diaries, she also urged parents for their children to keep a calendar of firsts. And this part of her method artistically documents when the first tadpole emerges from the egg, or when the first caterpillar spins his cocoon, or when the first butterfly emerges from the cocoon, which naturally teaches our children the metamorphic changes that insects go through, the progression of seasons, and the state of the environment at the time of this first occurrence. So really, this is such a beautiful way to document a child's first, right? So I put together this calendar of firsts, and you can see the cover here. And I'll just give you an example of a page. And as you can see, there's a place to put your date, and there's a place to put where this occurred. And there's a day for each day of the week. This is available as a free downloadable PDF for a short time only. And I recommend that you print this out on watercolor paper, and your children can make watercolor entries into their calendar of firsts. And when you're picking out your watercolor paper, I recommend 90 to 140 pound cold press watercolor paper, just to prevent buckling and bleeding from your pages. So I was talking in the Charlotte Mason style homeschooling group that I have, and I proposed that I do a monthly handicraft, and that went over really well. So I decided this month I was going to do a handicraft tutorial on a book binding. So if you print out your calendar of firsts, you can also turn this into a handicraft to do with your children, or if your child is older, this is a handicraft that they can learn how to do themselves. So the remainder of this video is going to be a handicraft book binding tutorial.
A list of supplies includes waxed thread, a ruler, a hole puncher, a pencil, a needle. It's not necessary to reinforce your edges. However, I do suggest it so that it doesn't tear. At the time, I didn't have Scotch packing tape on hand, so I just took some laminating paper and ran it through my laminator. However, you can do this with clear Scotch packing tape and just run the tape along your edges and then fold it over onto the other side, and then trim your edges with a pair of scissors. Now I take my ruler and my pencil, and I mark down about a 1/2 inch down the top of the page. I do this at the bottom too. I make 3 marks at the top and 3 marks at the bottom. I measure in about a 1/2 inch, and I make these marks 3/4 of an inch apart. This is my cover board. I used this from the watercolor pad that I had purchased, and I cut it in half and fit it to form the watercolor paper that I had printed out. I used my hole puncher to pierce holes into the markings I had made with my pencil. And then I used my cover board as a template for my other pages. I measure a 1/2 inch down, a 1/2 inch in, and 3/4 inch apart on my other pages as well. Next, I roll out 6 long pieces of wax thread for each hole. Next, I take my needle and thread and I thread it through the first hole. This is my anchor piece, and so I tie it off. I take my needle and thread again, and I come up under the cover board and thread it through. Now I've come up from under the cover board and I make sure that I go through the first loop that I made. I do this with the next sheet of paper and I thread it through. I loop the thread around and behind, and then I loop it through the previous stitch. I bring it back up, and then I get the next page and I loop it through the next hole on the next page. I'm just about wrapping it up, and now I am taking my cover and pulling my needle and thread through, and I'll tie a knot close to the hole again. Now I'm going to take my needle and thread it through the previous loop. Except for this time, I'm going to do that twice. On the inside, I'm going to take my thread and then tie 2 knots in it and trim the edges with a pair of scissors. Well, that's it. This is a single sheet book binding for a calendar of firsts. A Charlotte Mason style calendar of firsts. Thank you for watching. Please leave some feedback in the comments.